So some rather earth-shattering news here if you are an SEO professional. Rand Fishkin posted yesterday that he was given leaked Google API documentation. I'm going to give a link in the comments so that you can look at it for yourself. This is what it looks like. There are other sources online that you can find it, but I'm not going to link to it directly. So it's important to note these files are not confirmed to be real. But Rand has had these since early May, and he's worked with some colleagues of his, including Mike King and others, in an attempt to verify them. And what they've said is that there's very little evidence that these are made up. It doesn't mean that they're real, but there's very little evidence that they're made up. So let's talk about what these files actually are. And I want to start by saying they are not the ranking algorithm. So there are two lists here. One is a list of attributes. These are definitions, potentially definitions from Google's ranking algorithm. And the second that we have is these modules. These modules, they're not code in Google's systems. Instead, they're documents that help developers who are building with the Google Cloud Platform. These attributes, and there's over 14,000 of them, we don't know if these are actually being used in Google search ranking or not. We don't know what these are. But that being said, these 14,000 individual attributes are from Google's Content API warehouse. This entire package seems to have been uploaded to GitHub in late March of 2024, March 27th, 24, and it was removed on May 7th of 24. So what do these attributes tell us? It's helpful as a list that shows us the data that Google collects. If Google has an attribute definition here, there's a pretty good chance that Google is collecting that data. It would be strange to create attribution definitions for data it doesn't have or can't collect. And we also know, and I'll show you if I search for deprecated, there are several attributes that are specifically noted to be deprecated. What that means, we don't actually know, but it is possible that unless something is specifically noted as deprecated, it's still being used in the ranking algorithm. But again, we don't know that. So what we do know will happen is a variety of people will pull this up and point to a very specific attribute and say, look, this is proof that Google thinks XYZ is very important in the rankings. And that's not the case, okay? We do know that even if everything that is listed as an attribute is still being used in the Google ranking, we'd have no idea how important that is. Because again, there are 14,000 attributes here. So there's just a massive, massive amount of data here. And what I want to touch on, I've gone through Rand's article here. I've gone through several other articles that talk about this. I've chatted with some colleagues. So I just want to sort of try to distill what we know now in terms of how this leak should impact how you think about doing SEO in the future. And again, this is all subject to change, of course. There's so much data here. This is years potentially of analysis to figure out what is actually in these documents and what it's telling us. But I want to start with a few things. First, we know, based on this data, that Google is collecting an insane amount of link data. Good links, bad links, we can find these if we search for them. So here are a couple of examples where we have bad clicks that show up. If we search for good click, we'd also see examples of that. So Google really seems like it's using user data to evaluate where you should rank if there's enough user data for that, right? So this is consistent with how I've talked about SEO in the past. Content for Google so that Google knows what you're writing about, and links can help to get your site to the high on the second page, maybe on the first page, high enough that there are enough of Google's users that it's generating enough user engagement data for Google to actually evaluate it based on its user data. Okay, but if you're on the 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th page, there's not enough user engagement. So this again, right, user engagement pushes you higher on the first page, it keeps you on the first page, but it can't use user engagement if you're ranked very, very poorly. The other thing that we've seen here over and over again is how important brand is. Google appears to be using a variety of methods to evaluate the brand and the brand appearance online. So we saw this especially in the Helpful Content update March 23 and the March Core update in 24, that traffic is being pushed to more and more larger brands like Reddit, like Quora, other large brands like that. So the more that your brand is being searched for and mentioned, the more likely Google is to send traffic to you, because the more your brand is searched for, the more it's talked about, the more trustworthy your brand becomes. And there's a lot of evidence that Google is tracking these attributes. Now, with the exception of that brand data, EEAT, and this has been a controversial topic in SEOs for years because Google has said over and over how important this EEAT is, expertise, authority, trustworthiness. But in this document, it's very rarely mentioned. So there's a lot of evidence that, hey, maybe EEAT isn't quite as important as Google keeps saying it is. Of course, with the exception of the brand mention that I just talked about, where Google is tracking brands. And on top of that, and here I can even show you, Google also is tracking authorship, okay, and using that author data as a content quality signal, similar to EEAT, but a little bit different. So one thing that this means, we had a client who tried to publish a bunch of content with an AI-generated image of an author and a made-up name. We told them that probably wouldn't actually work to build up trust. And looking at how Google is tracking data related to author names in this attributes list, I can confidently say that I would not do that, okay? I would want to use a real person's name who is a real authority in that space to use an author's byline, because Google is tracking who authors are and what they're writing. Okay, on top of that, we revealed here, it looks like there's manual whitelists specific to controversial or problematic topics like elections, things like that. It's basically whitelists of specific domains that are allowed to rank. Frankly, in my opinion, this is a good thing because we don't want random websites who just got a bunch of really trustworthy links and really good content to start to rank for topics like that. A domain authority metric. Now, Google has specifically said on multiple occasions that they don't have any metrics like site authority, domain authority. Okay, but quick search here as soon as it's finished, we can show that site authority is an attribute in this document. Now, again, we don't know how important it is. We don't know exactly how it might be used in its rank algorithm, but they clearly do track site authority. On top of that, looks like Google is using a sandbox, and I can search for sandbox and show you that sandbox appears. I'd mentioned before that Google likes to use user engagement data to decide where you should rank. Well, if you're on the 9th page of results, there's no user engagement data, what are they going to do? They have this sandbox where they might be pushing pages onto the first page of search results just to see what user engagement data is like and how it compares to the other pages that are already on the first page. So, if you pass that sandbox, maybe you get to stay on the first page. But certainly, again, the attribute sandbox is defined here, so it really seems like Google has a sandbox. The last thing I want to touch on here is that links are still important for ranking. And let me show you on Rand's post that here it is, PageRank, which was defined in the original 1990 Stanford dissertation paper written by Larry Page, still is defined in the attributes here. But it seems like what's important for links is how much traffic those links are getting. Links that get a lot of traffic are very trusted by Google and will do a lot to help you. Links that don't get a lot of traffic, they don't hurt you, but they seem to be ignored by Google. I've heard a lot of questions about the date of this. There is a date that's given. Let me go pull it up. This is the most recent date that is mentioned in this API Content Warehouse documentation, August 2023. This is, of course, just before the Helpful Content update came out, which happened in autumn of 23, followed, of course, by the March core algorithm update in March of 2024. So this document, it was uploaded in March of 24, but we don't know if this is the August 2023 version or potentially even the March of 24 version. We don't know, but at least this does appear to be an August 2023 recent package of the Google attributes. So with all that being said, what does this mean, right? We know brand is important, your author is important, the user engagement metrics on your website are important. Links are important, specifically links from websites that are getting traffic. If you're a small publisher with a small website and you're not super well known, you don't have an established brand, I'm very sorry to say that this is likely bad news for you. Small publishers, this seems to make it much more difficult to get search traffic to actually get ranked based on the preliminary findings that we have here. This is also consistent with these small niche sites that have just been hammered over and over again with the HCU update, with the March Core algorithm update. I've had niche sites who were making money, they lost a ton of traffic, and now they're not. I know a lot of other people in a similar boat, and a lot of that traffic is going from these small niche sites to these large established brands. So advice, if you're looking for traffic from Google organic search, then start to think about how to build a brand, how to get people searching for your name, mentioning your name, both in links on trusted websites and also social media searches, Google search itself, all of these things to build a brand, to build your author identity. Those seem to be more and more important, as essentially what Google is wanting to do is remove these low quality affiliate websites from its search. We know for years that these low quality websites that are just there to try to make money have been, overpowering a lot of the search results and making Google search quality really decline. So we've seen a lot of evidence with these attributes in exactly how Google is attempting to overcome that by putting more emphasis on links with traffic, a known brand, and a known author, all things which are quite difficult to fake. So there you have it. That's my quick summary of what we've learned in the last day or so from this Google Content Warehouse API link. Again, if you want to look at this yourself, you can search online. You might be able to find links to this, or I'll have a link in the comments where you can go and download.